They sold us for years on the idea that they were building a certain type of defense under Dan Quinn with these big-ass corners, and here's Nashawn Wright that they drafted in the 3rd round, who's now with the Bears. And they were going to play all this man coverage, and then seemingly none of that mattered when it came time to hire a new defensive coordinator, because they hired a guy who doesn't run a defense similar to Dan Quinn's at all. And now they're kind of stuck with it. It feels like something that could get better over the next year and a half, but almost impossible to see this being anything other than another Mike Nolan year this year.
Remember seeing that Saban-Belichick documentary?
Yeah.
When they were talking about they have a way they do things. So if they hire this defensive coordinator, he doesn't come in with his thing. Like, they have a way, and so they're going to hire. So they have a firm belief. Like, I firmly believe whatever, this, 4-3 or 3-4. And that can't just change on the coordinator of the day that I hire. Like, what do we firmly believe is our philosophy? And that is how we operate. And I guess that's what you can have with a very strong head coach who gets to hire his own coordinators.
Yep. You
do not have that here. You have a front office who really loves the hiring and the firing, especially of coordinators. We've seen this so many times over the years where oftentimes the head coach had no say in hiring the coordinator. Maybe had to give an obligatory, nod or hand wave at it, and they pretended like he was but do we know that Schottenheimer wanted Flus, or is it just that Eberflus is a name? He was just a head coach. Schottenheimer, not a head coach, never has been. This would be a good guy to have around because he kind of is, at least he's got some head coach experience, can kind of help Schotty through this, and he was a very good defensive coordinator wherever he was. So, that's just a surface level. If you weren't a football insider, you would look at those things and say, very qualified. But if you dig a little deeper, now we've also talked about the fact that he was anticipating having Micah Parsons and was probably prepping whatever his defensive, look was going to be this year around that. And that's where you say, would Micah have been impactful in that game? Would this be the same with Micah? I would say it's not necessarily the same with Micah, just because Micah, when he came in, because he came into a Mike Nolan defense, didn't he? Where all of a sudden everyone around him was better because now you have him. And you always have to keep an eye on him, and you have 2 players on him, and that's going to free up something else. You don't have that one guy anymore. And that has to have an impact. It's just a trickle-down impact on the rest of the players.
Yeah, it definitely does. No matter what defense you're running, it has a huge trickle-down effect. But to go back to the Flus head coaching thing, I think that's a good point because I think it's pretty likely that the most important thing about Matt Eberflus to Jerry Jones was that he had been a head coach, because he knows he's hiring a first-time head coach in Schottenheimer. He's also going to have him call plays. So they had to, in Jerry's mind, get someone else, worst-case scenario, to handhold for Schottenheimer. But the problem is, I genuinely don't believe that Jerry stopped and thought beyond that, or anybody, and thought, this guy might not work with what we have in-house at all. We've got a pretty specific thing going here that Dan Quinn liked. And, I sometimes think that it's a little bit overplayed, the whole, you hear this in the draft season a lot, oh, he's a man corner. This guy's a zone corner. And I'm like, there's a little bit of this is football. They're going to make you do both. You're going to have to press. Some guys are better at this than others. But there definitely was an identity they had been building towards, and I wonder how much the Cowboys even really thought about that. I know that sounds basic, but I think they most likely thought, well, we know Flus. He's coached here before. We trust him. He is a name. He's not a bad coordinator. Roll him in here. And I'm not an insider by any means, but it's very hard for me to come away from yesterday feeling like those guys on the defensive side are texting each other last night and this morning being like, I know we got this. I know we can do it. He's right. This plan will work. Let's stick with it. I feel like it's much more likely that they're all already way checked out.
You're talking about players buy-in.
Players buy in on the defensive side of the ball and being like, there's no shot we can turn this triage unit into passable by December, so let's just F off now and be done with it. It doesn't feel like this is coming around to me.
Something we didn't think about in this week leading up, because a lot of the thought was, okay, here's our defensive coordinator knows that team. He will kind of know about Caleb Williams. He will know the little tricks. He will know how to stop that team because he knows a lot about that team. We never thought about their head coach knows this guy who was their defensive coordinator, or is now our, because their head coach has faced him plenty of times and been very successful.
He's faced him plenty of times, and he still knows guys who played for him, which is why I thought this answer about the flea flicker was very interesting.
We have gadgets up every week. I give the staff a lot of credit. They're going through and they're watching the tape and finding out things that may or may not fit from whether it was Dallas this year or some of the stuff we're watching of Chicago's defense from yesteryear. So that was really a staff find, and like I said, we worked it all week and felt really comfortable calling it this week.
Yeah, I didn't have that in the cards. I didn't have – well, actually, we hired a guy that people are so excited to exploit that when his old team plays him, they're like, dude, you've got to run this flea flicker on him. He can't stop it. I thought the first report from the broadcast was interesting. Now, I went and found this, rewatching the game. It's very funny to listen to what we're about to play after you know the outcome of the game.
Speaking of the Dallas team, they have a coach that's very familiar with the Bears, don't they, Aaron Andrews?
That felt intentional to me, by the way, as we claim responsibility for every whim in the media that blows. Saying out Aaron Andrews.
The Dallas team, they have a coach that's very familiar with the Bears, don't they, Aaron Andrews?
Absolutely, Ken. Defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, Matt Eberflus, returning to Chicago, where, of course, he was the head coach here for almost 3 years. He told us this week, I'm grateful for my time here, but he also said there was a good amount of hallway talk this week. The defensive coaches meeting with the offensive coaches. Eberflus saying, I have a lot of knowledge about this team. I know their strengths, their weaknesses. I know how to cover them, and I shared that. Kevin, he also spent time last year in quarterback and offensive meetings with Caleb Williams, so it'll be very interesting to see how this firsthand knowledge pays off.
Yeah, no,
It will be very interesting.
How it pays
That stuff
off.
sounds great.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Boy, that's fun to listen to after the fact.
So not only did he not provide a whole lot of insights on how to slow down Caleb Williams, there's a stake Looney Tunes style hung around his neck over there, and they just can't wait to uncork deep shots on him really all day.